Hi everyone, and welcome to the NAEP Insights video. I'm Greg Mackway from the University of California. I'm part of the supply chain management team at San Francisco and Berkeley campuses. I'm also a member of the NAEP Educational Procurement Journal's editorial board and responsible for the Heard on the Street column. We started creating some videos to provide insights for the ever-changing landscape of higher education procurement. So we'll be focusing on themes of people, content, tools, and in this video, analytics. This video is recorded using Google Hangouts, so go ahead and click the button in the bottom left-hand corner to get more content embedded in the video by joining Google Hangout. And with that, let's get started. Hi everyone, it's great seeing you. This video is about insights in analytics, talking specifically about the analytical hierarchy process with my good friend, Andrew Clark. Andrew, why don't you say hi, introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Hi, Greg. So I'm the Director of Strategic Sourcing for UCSF in Berkeley. My role is to manage our strategic sourcing program here at these two campuses in pursuit of the savings and value for the campus that we set as our goals each year. So thanks for having me on.
Great. Yeah, thanks. So today we're talking about the analytic hierarchy process. Do you want to give me a quick rundown of what that is in your mind?
Sure. So the analytic hierarchy process is a process that you can use to get stakeholders who don't quite believe they have the same end result in mind. You can get them on the same page, get them to agree on the criteria that you're going to be using to make a decision, and then use that to funnel them into a decision at the end of the project. So, in essence, a way to get conflicting groups of stakeholders to agree on an outcome.
Cool. How did you first start using this?
So I first came across it. I had an internship with the U.S. Department of Defense doing industrial engineering, and as part of that internship program, we first learned about it. The guy that was teaching us, I believe, used it in the 80s and 90s to help with the base closures that happened in the U.S., the military base closures. And so if you could imagine, they had 4-star generals sitting in a room trying to decide which base to close. There's no single leader in that instance, yet they needed consensus. And so he walked us through how to use this tool, how to apply it, and we actually did an exercise where we applied it ourselves.
What'd you apply it to?
So it was the most important part of our internship. It was where we were going to have our celebratory lunch at the end of the internship process. Excellent.
That's
and
great.
I still can't, even to this day, I can't remember where we ate lunch, but I remember quite a bit about the analytic hierarchy process.
Cool. Well, let's get into that. Taking a look at just stealing some information from Wikipedia, here's a quick summary of what you were describing. That, yeah, this is a tool for organizing and analyzing complex decisions. It's used for group decision making, and it talks about comparing multiple kind of outcomes and figuring out what the balance is between those different outcomes. We use this to really determine with these videos going forward what we wanted to highlight. So in these videos, we said, well, we could focus on interviewing people. We could talk about these analytic tools that we have. We could talk about content like POs and contracts that we wanted to share, but we didn't know what the ratio should be. So what I did was I put together that survey that you all should have seen. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. So here we go. So this survey was what we asked everybody who was participating to take a look at, fill out. I offered up some coffee if you filled it out, and we put this in a pairwise comparison group. So here are 4 topic areas. Give me your preference on which one of these are more important to you. Do you want to hear more about tools? Do you want to hear more about content? Do you want to hear more about people? Do you want to hear more about content? So I started collecting this data from all of you, and then I turned that over to Andrew, and I asked him, hey, can you do something with this to help us kind of solve this problem? So with that, Andrew, do you want to kind of jump into what you did with it once I turned it over to you?
Sure. So let me show you some analysis that I did. The first thing I wanted to do with it is just get a sense of, just in general, what did it look like? What did the scoring look like for this? And let me bring up my slide here.
Hey, there we go.
All right, can you see my PowerPoint or no?
I'm looking at your email.
What?
So sorry, everyone. This is our first time using Google Hangouts, so we're trying to figure it out. You're learning along with us.
There we go. All right, now you see my bar chart?
I see it now.
All right, so that's the first thing I did is what I wanted to look at was the total observations. And so what that is a vote, right? So every time somebody picked one of those little options, it sort of incremented here. And along this axis, I just have the categories. And so, you know, the first thing I noticed was that content and analytics seem to be the most prevalent. And then you got tools and people out here on the end, and there were a couple people who had no preference. But, you know, I wanted to sort of get a better feel for the information. So I did run it through part of the analytic hierarchy process. And let me show you quickly what that analytic hierarchy process looks like.
It looks like you.
It does.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Okay, so in general, there's 4 basic steps to this process, and the PowerPoint slide I'm recycling is actually one that we use to describe this in terms of if I were running a bid, how I might use this to help quantify with my stakeholders what their preference is for the bid. But there's really a brainstorming activity where you try and figure out, you know, what are the features that I care about. There's grouping those into some really good needs, good independent needs that are separate and distinct from each other. When I got this data set, you had already done that, right? You already told me that there were analytics and content and people and tools. So I didn't need to do these first 2 steps.
Got it.
The next step would be actually weighting them. So, you know, we know that there is some preference, and we can see that from the bar chart, but actually coming up with an actual quantified weight for each of those groups is what goes on here. And then if this were some kind of an RFP, maybe we would then write questions, and there's a whole train of thought on how we might do that. So I went ahead and did the category weighting. And one of the things that I have done in the past is I have created myself a Excel tool that allows me to do that calculation on the fly. It's not a very easy calculation to go through. The math is really not pleasant unless you're a mathematician or some kind of a engineer. And so I ended up coding it up in VBA, and I use this tool.
And if anybody wants to actually learn the math on this, we've linked to a series of MIT linear algebra videos that describe the analytical hierarchy process and the math behind it. Andrew, have you watched those videos yet?
I have watched them like 2 or 3 times, and I still don't understand them.
Okay, cool. So if anybody's willing to become an expert in this space, the videos are there to learn, and then you can teach the rest of us how it all works.
Yep, it's definitely, those videos are the math that underlies this. So in short, what I did is I created this tool, and what it will end up doing once I hit what it'll do is it'll ask you a series of questions about what you prefer, and then it will ask you the second question, which is how much do you prefer it? So, you know, this is actually one area where you didn't provide me enough data, Greg. When you're going through these preferences, knowing that I prefer analytics to people is good, but I also need to know how much I prefer it. Do I prefer it, you know, to an extreme extent, or are they kind of similar in nature, but I like analytics a little bit better?
Right? So if I were to do this survey again, do it with the same pairwise comparison, but then provide maybe like a sliding scale of some sort that says, okay, but if you put these two side by side, where do your feelings really lie?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because that allows you to get at things like, you know, I prefer one, but they're sort of equal, or no way, I totally prefer this one in all way, shape, and form. And I shouldn't even be considering the other one at all.
Got it.
So I ran it through the tool, and these numbers actually refer to the preference that I calculated. And the way I calculated that was by looking at the votes for and the votes against, and just sort of doing some simple math to come out with some indicator of preference. And this matrix here of numbers, it's you know, don't worry too much about it. There is rhyme and reason to it, but the end result is you come out with this matrix of preference. You run the fancy math, and at the end you end up with these this weighting that tells you generally about your preference for each of these factors. The other thing it gives you is something called a consistency index, and it measures it versus a random index. So, you know, the thing we're getting at there is if we say that analytics is more important than people, and people is more important than tools, then logically we can't say tools is more important than analytics. And this consistency index gives us a metric to gauge how consistent we are being in our ranking process. And because we measure it against the random index, what ends up happening is we say we're better than random. That's good enough, and we can move forward.
So just to hit on that real quick, Andrew, the better than random, that's like we're doing all this work to make a decision. And would you say that being better than random means that you're at least providing value by making this decision?
It has nothing to do with the decision. All it has to do with is that we are being consistent in how we are assessing the value factors that have been outlined.
Okay. All right.
So if we are not better than random, then what that means is that we're saying logically, we're doing logically impossible things. Like saying, even though analytics is better than people and people are better than tools, tools are better than analytics, right?
Got it.
And it can't work that way. So it gives you that measurement. What I've seen in practice when I've gone through this with teams of people is as you're going through it and you're saying, okay, you know, analytics versus people, what do you guys think? You know, and they'll say analytics, and you're like, okay, well, is that a lot or a little? And they say 7. You're like, okay, cool. And you put it in. Then you get to the next one, analytics versus tools, and you keep going. Once you start getting to things that they've already measured, they try to maintain consistency themselves. And you'll actually hear groups of people have that dialogue. They'll say, well, we said analytics was a 7 compared to people, and we said that people and tools was more important than people. So that means, and they'll get to the right outcomes. So
they'll balance out the equation on their own.
They will, and it's fun because during those discussions, oftentimes you end up coming back to the definition of your categories, because people will say, well, analytics is more important if you consider this to be analytics, is it? And then the team talks about it, and they get sort of sucked into that for a minute, and then they solve it on their own, or with the help of me helping them, and say, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and then you keep going. And so by the end of this thing, by the time you filled out this matrix with all of their preference, what I found is that the group 1 agrees on what's in that matrix, 2 has a really good understanding of those categories, and 3 is generally not surprised by the weighting that comes out.
And you're doing a better job of defining the need at that point as well, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The other thing that I tend to do is I will, let's say that we're going through this, and we get to analytics and people, and Greg says, analytics is way more important than people, and Andrew says, no way, I love people. People is so important. We need all people. I actually stop at that point and make them give their best case for why that is, and make the team decide on what answer they're going to give. So there's no averaging in coming to these numbers, which again was a sort of a variation in what you provided. But typically, I don't do averaging. I make everybody come to consensus and talk through disagreement on the front end. And the simple reason for that is that, in the instance where Andrew and Greg are disagreeing, the end result's going to make one of us happy, right? And I would rather not have the other one hate me. I would rather the other one understand the decision that's made, feel like they had a say in it, and that the team made the decision, than having Greg mad at me because we went Andrew's way.
Yeah, I've got plenty of other things to be mad at you about, so that's
exactly
fine. Right. Cool. So with that outcome, what are we seeing now after we ran through the tool?
So after we run through the tool, you get this weighting, and what we're seeing in this particular instance is that analytics actually scored higher than content. Now, if you go back to our sheet, just doing the bar chart, content came up higher than analytics, right? So there's a difference there. That's what you notice. The overall general sense of it is still the same. Analytics and content matter most. People and tools matter least.
Cool. No, that's great. I think that really gave an understanding of kind of and to me it makes sense. It aligns to the people who we asked questions about, right?
Right.
Mostly I think we had a lot of buyers or sourcing folks who were responding in this space, and those kind of align to how do I do my job better, right? That's the things that I want to hear about. The people, I think if we were to talk more at management level, supervisory responses, we may have gotten a little more of a slant towards that. And my personal preference is, just talking to the two of us or talking to me all the time isn't fun. So there's got to be a people component in here for sure. But it's good to know that this is kind of how that played out in the survey. So that's cool.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting. So I did explore that, the difference between the content coming up first on this chart versus the content coming up second on the analytic hierarchy process. And I actually pinpointed it down to one simple thing, and it was people. The people factor, I believe, is what is making that difference. And if you look at analytics versus people, I calculated that the group preferred it at a rate of 7, preferred analytics at a rate of 7, right? And this is out of a 9-point scale. So that's a pretty significant preference of analytics to people. But if you look at content versus people, which is out over here or down here, what you actually find is that we preferred people to content. Okay, so because people is such a low score, and because we've got this weird inconsistency where we actually prefer the low score thing to our higher score content, I believe that's pulling the content score down and pushing analytics up. So
Okay.
could be a very random thing in when I interpreted the results, but there's a analytic way to understand that. And if this was a group dynamic, I would probably come back to the group again and validate that piece. Do we really care about that more? And if we don't, let's change the score, because we can do that and recalculate and see if we end up with a score that better represents our collective beliefs about these factors and their importance.
Yeah, and I think based on our data collection error, right, not having the weighting along with it, we can do the same thing, right? There's nothing saying that I can't go back and say, sorry guys, can you take the survey again with this new tweak, because we're seeing irregularities that we can't explain. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to say, hey, no, if you see something that's weird, you can stop the process and try to fix it.
Absolutely.
But we'll do what we normally do and just move forward on assumptions.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to say, is that the way these things play out, at least in the bids that I've run, is we end up getting into a space where we've got this, and it's not the end all be all. It actually is then used by the team to calculate something that they're comfortable with. Typically, we maintain the same rank position, but they'll sort of round the numbers off. These are pretty precise numbers. They'll drop it back to 42% maybe, or even 40%, and sort of move things up and down minimally to get to their comfort level. And that's fine, because at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is get that group of people on the same page about their collective preference, so that when the results come in and align to that preference and you pick a winner, they don't question why it happened that way. They don't quarrel with the response, and it's just ultimately quite apparent to them why the winner won. So
yeah, so it's really stakeholder management with the backing of a analytic tool to support that.
Yep.
Cool. Do you have an example we can take a look at on actually where you did this within the procurement environment?
I do. So we ran a bid for tax-free ethyl alcohol, and in fact, we ended up running this for UCSF, Berkeley, and UC Davis. And what we were trying to do is figure out how much of our quality points that the vendors would respond to, figure out the weighting for those quality points. And so we used this process. We outlined very carefully our categories. It's sort of shorthand a little bit, because I have limited room, but it's there just as a reminder to the team. And you can see over here, the weighting ended up being pretty heavily into program management. As I remember back, it was because of the tax-free permit and the program requirements around that permit and the university policies that govern that program. The team was really nervous about those, and so that scored high. But what we ended up doing is using this process as a starting point, and we ended up using these proposed values in the actual bid. So.
And then what do you mean you use those values in the bid? So you've got this weighting, I guess, of the importance of these needs. And sure. What do you do with that piece next?
Okay, so what we ended up doing was writing questions that we thought would address these dimensions, and then used the proposed scores that we came up with as the weighting to determine the value of the respondent's answer. Now, one thing to bring up when you're writing the questions, there's this notion of naturally occurring scales that if you think about it for a second, it can make your life really, really easy. And the best way I can describe it is by using an example, right? A naturally occurring scale is a scale that exists in the world that if two people were to assess the information, they would come to the same conclusion. So let me give you the example now. Let's say that I cared deeply about sustainability, and my question had to do with how far the product has traveled. Well, miles is a naturally occurring scale, and if I use that, then any two people can calculate the miles that the product traveled and come to some kind of answer, right? The opposite of that might be a hypothetical scale, like if I said, let's score the company's sustainability policy, and if I didn't give any guidance, go ahead.
So you take the sustainability policy, I take the sustainability policy, and we say arbitrarily, how good is this on 1 to 10?
Yes, how much do we like it, or how much does it meet our need, or whatever it is, without something that we can wrap our minds around, some kind of scale that says this is good, this is bad, this is in between, then we're going to come to different conclusions, or we're going to base it based on our expertise, which is different, and you're going to end up with apples and oranges at the end.
Got it.
Or worse, arbitrary disagreements, right?
Yeah.
Or I disagree with you over very, very little things.
Yeah, so now you're spending time on that, and specifically on this one, the area of sustainability. How important is it to come to given these weightings? How much time should a group spend on talking about sustainability?
Yeah, so we use these weightings in two ways, right? We use the weightings to determine how many questions we're going to ask. So in this example, sustainability scored low. So we only asked maybe 1 or 2 questions on sustainability, whereas program management had 53% of the bid, or whatever we ended up at. We asked quite a bit more questions. They were more in depth. Me, as the sort of project manager or bid manager on this particular bid, when things are that lopsided and you end up with these 53% categories, I will throw some open-ended questions in there because it makes the team feel like they're really doing their work. But when you get to things like, the lower impact ones, we'll just sit down, me and an analyst, or, me and somebody who's expert in maybe one of these areas, and we'll just brainstorm, okay, how do we ask this question? How do we ask questions using naturally occurring scales that can then be scored by only one person? Like, how many miles does your, product flow, or even, do you have a sustainability policy, right? That's binary, yes or no. Either they do or they don't. Can be scored by one person. Not everybody has to score that. Likewise, on implementation, how many resources are you going to devote to implementation? 3 is obviously better than 2. 50 would be better than 3, right? I mean, those are, you get my point. They're not arbitrary, I guess.
Yeah, and it forces you to think through, what you're going to do with all of this bid, right? And kind of the process and the steps that you need to do to manage the bid process overall.
And I think one of the things that underlies why we put so much work into some of these bids is that we recycle, right? Our thought is that if we do all this work now and we come out with the questions for delivery on this bid, well, we're going to run this bid in 3 years or 5 years or 2 years. And even if we don't, we're going to run another bid, and it's going to have delivery. And if we've got a really good naturally occurring scale for delivery, well, then we've got it. So, we try and recycle these things and keep them around.
Cool. Anything else on this sheet that you want to show us, Andrew?
No, I think that's it. I think that's pretty much the tool that I have. I'm more than willing to share that with anybody. I think the one thing I'll say about that is that I don't really want to be the help desk for that tool into the future. And so if you want to use it, give me a call. I'm happy to walk you through it, but you end up using it at your own risk. And I'll probably help you, but
well, it sounds like if we can get enough people interested in using it, maybe there's an opportunity to scale it out, right?
Sure, absolutely. It'd make a great web app if anybody wants to work on a web app with me on it.
How many questions do you think you have? If you say that there's scalable pieces that you can kind of throw into that tool and then use it through the process, do you have a pretty good repository built up?
It's okay. I mean, it's all University of California specific, and it's but yeah, we have some questions. Not an abundant amount by any means, but.
Cool. I think I forgot to mention this at the very beginning, but Andrew's LinkedIn information is linked through the showcase on the left of the Google Hangout, so we can do that too. So Andrew, one more question for you on this piece. Looking at the tool, what do you think are some of the drawbacks of using it compared to our current standard process or other kind of ranking processes for RFP scoring and development?
Yeah, there are some drawbacks. One drawback, and probably the most obvious, is that it takes time, right? You're dealing with groups of people instead of individuals one-on-one, which means you have all the headaches of getting people into the same room and all of that scheduling aggravation. You also have the time if there's disagreements, right? If Andrew and Greg disagree and we call a timeout because these two guys can't come to consensus, well, that's time is ticking, right? You also have the math, right? I mean, this math that underlies this is linear algebra. It's applied mathematics. It's not easy by any means, and it's not easy to describe or understand. So that's another drawback. What I found, the thing that I found though, is that because I built it out into an Excel tool with a button, people seem pretty okay to trust the math. I push that button and those percentages show up, and I have not yet been questioned about what's it doing. So
do nothing, but put a button in Excel, and you can move forward on any process.
I call it the magic button. So I think time and the difficulty of the math are probably two of the biggest drawbacks of this process.
All right. Well, that's not terrible. It sounds like you end up getting that back in spades if you put the time and effort into building out the process to help you out. I'd say,
yeah. If all goes well with this, if you use this process and all goes well, by the time you get done at the end, the group is like, well, this was a huge waste of time. The decision was so clear. It was such an easy decision. I don't even know why we did this, right? And everybody is saying that, then you did a good job, right? Because in the beginning, they had conflicting opinions of importance. They wanted to go different ways. And in the end, everybody's saying this was an easy decision, right? Which is exactly what you want.
Yeah, so that's always the best. Why are you even here? Why are you even bothering us?
Yeah. Exactly.
Cool. Well, Andrew, thanks again for joining us on this topic. I think there's some great insight. Hopefully that opened people's eyes up to a new tool to manage your stakeholders in using analytics. Andrew, any last thoughts? Anything you want to share before we close out?
Nope. Just let me know if there's anything I can do to help you guys as you're exploring the analytic hierarchy process or any decision-making framework. Let me know. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to even help you set up and run a process at your campus if that's what you want to do.
Cool. Well, Andrew, thanks again, and thank you all for tuning in today to learn about this process. We'll be doing more of these videos, more in-depth around those topic areas we talked about. So maybe one a month is what we'll focus on, and we'll continue doing the forum updates or the forum highlights as well. So with that, thanks again. Any questions, go ahead and leave those, or comments, leave those in the comments field below or in the NAEP forum, and we will talk then. All right, guys, thanks again. Talk to you soon. Bye.